We are doing this webinar series from Association of North America Higher Education International. It's a non-profit organization, and our mission is to promote and encourage a global culture at member institutions, and also ensure that students and faculty successes are globalized by enhancing global initiatives among member institutes and global engagement. Today, other than this webinar series, we also do have different conferences, journals, and stuff like this, which is part of Association of North America Higher Education International. In short, we call it ANAHEI. Now, today I would thank Professor Dr. Stan, who is a professor in tourism economics, and he is also vice rector for research in Varna Institute of Management in Bulgaria. He has recently developed his interest into robotics and robonomics, which is a very interesting name. So I saw he has been invited to different places to talk about this topic. And since he is a good friend, I thought of exploiting this friendship and inviting him to talk about this topic as part of the webinar series for ANAHEI. So what we will be doing is we will record this webinar for those who cannot join in live, and we'll post it on the website for ANAHEI and also on Facebook, so that people who did not join can later on learn about it. Or now, if you have any questions about the webinar, throughout the webinar, you can use the chat option in the Zoom or raise your hands. We'll take your questions, and during the webinar for a couple of minutes, we'll take a break and we'll ask those questions from Professor Stan. Now, other than that, what we'll have to do is I'll quickly tell you a little bit more about ANAHEI, and then I'll give Stan a chance to talk about his topic. So ANAHEI, we do have visiting scholar programs. We invite scholars from around the world to USFSM so that they can work with us in terms of research or some other collaborations. We do have partnership programs around the world where students and faculty can go into different member institutes. There are two journals we are having under ANAHEI. One of them is AIBA journal, which is International Interdisciplinary Business Advancement Journal, and the other one is Journal of Global Education and Research. ANAHEI also organizes multiple conferences around the world every year. We do have different awards and scholarships, and we have distinguished lecture series such as the one today. If you want more information, or if you want to join ANAHEI, you can go on anahei.organization or anahei.org. The webinars, today's webinar and some previous webinars or upcoming webinars, you can also go on this link and check out all the webinars we are arranging. So Stan, he is a good friend, and that's why I'm calling him Stan. He's a professor in tourism economics. He's also vice rector for research in Varna Institute of Management. There's only one tourism journal in Bulgaria, and a very, very good journal. I've published a couple of papers in that journal too. European Journal of Tourism Research. It's indexed in Scopus, and if you're following Stan on Facebook, you will see that the journal is doing very, very good. He has recently indexed it into ESCI, which is the stepping stone for the journal to move on to SSCI. And once he does it, I think he is going to get a lot of submissions from Asian countries. Stan has published over 120 publications, which are including journal articles, books, chapters, conference reports, industry reports, etc., into multiple fields. One of them is Robonomics, which he's going to talk about today, hotel marketing, hotel chain pricing, revenue management, destination marketing management, etc. And he has worked on his research into the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Norway, Cyprus, USA, and Italy. That's pretty much about Stan's introduction. And now I'll invite Stan to move forward and start his own presentation and talk about Robonomics. Stan?
Okay. I unmuted myself. Do you see me? Hello, do you hear me? I cannot start the video, however. Okay, the video started. So I will share the screen now. Okay, and this is the presentation. So, Robonomics principles, benefits, challenges, and solutions. Quite provocative topic, but quite new, and I hope that in the future it will attract a lot of research. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Ali for inviting me for this webinar, and of course I would like to thank all the attendees for sharing this time with me. I will skip my presentation because Faizan already presented me in great details. So, robots have arrived. And if, when we mention the word robots, usually some people think about robots like this, like C3PO, R2D2, BB8, that are full with different gadgets, and they can help humans in any situation. Of course, such robots, they exist in Star Wars, but in reality, we are not talking about such robots. Of course, other people, when they hear the word robots, they think about Terminators, artificial intelligence that is going to become sentient and will kill all humans on Earth. Thanks God, we are not talking about such robots, and probably this scenario is not coming anytime soon. And there's also a third group of people who think that when we mention robot, we are talking about androids that resemble human beings in any aspect, including intelligence. Of course, in Isaac Asimov's books, there are such robots, including telepathic robots, but we are not talking about such cases. When we talk about robots, we're talking about robots like these ones. We've seen robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies being widely adopted in manufacturing. In fact, if we make research, we'll find that most of our cars are actually produced by robots, not by human employees. And recent research about manufacturing in America show that actually the decline of manufacturing jobs in the United States was a result not so much of the Mexicans taking the jobs of poor American employees, as some politicians say, but because of productivity increases based on automation technologies. Of course, robots are entering warehousing, supply and logistics, so that instead of having human employees doing all the tedious tasks, we have robots that do all the sorting of products. Of course, robots are entering agriculture, and many farmers in Western Europe are starting adopting robots and technologies to overlook for their crops. And self-driving cars, this is one of the newest hypes, and they are not available for sale yet, but in the next few years they will hit the market. Currently they are at testing stage, and but they have huge potential. Of course, in medicine, robots have been widely adopted, and in many cases, some operations have been assisted by medical robots. Of course, robots have entered warfare. This is the dream of any army general, to be able to take military actions without involving his own soldiers. And unfortunately, such military drones have been quite often used in recent years. And also, artificial intelligence is entering legal services. Computer programs are helping lawyers to sift through various cases and to find the most suitable ones that will help them to justify particular thesis in a work case. Of course, in hospitality, we have robots hitting hotels, like robot concierges or robots that are used for delivery services in the hotel. Currently, there are few hotels that are completely automated, although not entirely completed. These are Henna hotels in Japan, but customers have mixed acceptance of this completely automated hotels. Of course, we see automation technologies in restaurants. So the different kiosks where the customer can order their meal, can pay, and just wait for the pickup of the food. And in other restaurants, we also have conveyor belts, which also deliver the food, so that waiters are not necessary. For meetings and events, we have robots that are used for telepresence, so that instead of a person to travel to the destination and to have the meeting, we have the person connecting to a robot, and the robot is moving instead of the person there. This, by the way, raises questions about the future of travel. Of course, sometimes robots are also used for delivering drinks during breaks at conferences and events. And next year, one of the cruise lines companies is launching a ship which will have one bar which is completely run by robots, by these same KUKA robots. Of course, in theme and amusement parks, we have automated tickets machines, which allow hundreds of people to buy tickets without any problems and skip the queues. Of course, at airports, other transport stations, we have all these self-check-in kiosks, and in the near future, we will have carts that will deliver the luggage. Yeah, travel agencies, tourist information centers, they also use kiosk for provision of information, so that the time of the employees in these agencies and information centers is saved, so that they can perform other revenue-generating activities. Museums, art galleries, they also use robots for provision of information, and digital assistants are on the market. So this is Echo and Echo Show by Amazon, which operated by Alexa software package, so that it is voice operated, and the user can ask the digital assistant to perform different tasks, completely voice operated. Of course, in households, we have autonomous vacuum cleaners, which is the dream for every household. And for swimming pools, we have robotic pool cleaners, which help the employees hotels clean the pools. And of course, we have robotic guards who move around and record, and they can inform the responsible people about something wrong, that is some wrongdoings. A few months ago, there was one such robot that fell into a fountain, and it caused quite a viral reaction on social media, that these robots are quite dumb, but I'm pretty sure that there are more people that fell into fountains than such robots. Of course, we have other robots like this one, Pepper, that can developed by SoftBank Robotics, which can be used for provision of information in service industries. And by the way, recently one of the Bulgarian banks bought several such robots and installed them in its offices in the country. Of course, artificial intelligence is used in search engines so that it helps users receive results that are relevant for them, and often they are localized. And also in social media chatbots. This is a screenshot from the chatbot of the European Journal of Tourism Research, which I developed a few months ago. It's relatively easy to develop such a chatbot. Of course, in artificial intelligence is also used in finance. Much of the trade on Wall Street actually takes place by algorithms rather than by human beings. High-frequency trade can only be implemented by computers. Of course, in e-commerce, we have all purchased different items from online retailers, and miraculously, when we buy something, then we start receiving information, promotions about other related products that may interest us. So computers are helping here as well. And of course, robots are entering sexual services. I trust every attendee is above the age of 18. Of course, we have been using mechanized male body parts for several decades now. They have been on the market, but for the future, we are talking about androids that will have full resemblance of humans and will be used for sexual services as well. So the tendency to use robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies in the production of goods and services will definitely accelerate in the future until society reaches a point when an overwhelming share of all the goods and services will be produced by such technologies with limited human involvement. Such an economic system based on robots, artificial intelligence, and automation is called Robonomics. Or, put in more formal terms, Robonomics is an economic system that uses robots, artificial intelligence, and service automation technologies as production factors instead of human labor. This is the key thing. These technologies are substituting human labor. So, we may ask the question, why robots? Why companies may decide to use robots, or why they would prefer not to use robots? Well, there are different reasons. The first one is that robots could work 24/7. If a human employee can work 40 hours a week, well, this is legally, but in academia, we all work 60 hours plus a week. But for robots, this is obviously 24/7. Robots could implement various tasks and expand the scope and expand their scope with software and hardware upgrades. Of course, for human beings, this would mean education, training, going to university, having training with other with consultants and other companies, etc. But with robots, and this could be made easier. Robots also could provide constant or improving quality of their work. Actually, they will perform the same task the same way. We all know that the emotional status or the psychological status of a human employee always influence the service that he or she delivers. Also, robots could fulfill their work correctly and in a timely manner. No need for reminders, no need to check again and again whether the work is completed. Also, they can do routine work repeatedly, not like human beings. We get bored after several hours of doing the same work, and repeated work actually dehumanizes. We can easily think about Charlie Chaplin and his movies. Also, robots do not complain, they do not get ill, they do not go on strikes, do not spread rumors, they do not discriminate, they do not quit their job without notice, they do not show negative emotions, they do not shirk from work, and all these negative things which human resource management shows that it is unfortunately related with human employees. Of course, there are many arguments why companies should not use robots, and the list is obviously not comprehensive. Robots lack creativity. They also will not anytime soon be completely independent of human supervision, so that there will definitely be a need of humans who will supervise them. Also, they lack personal approach. Although the software allows the robots to adjust their interaction with the humans on the basis of the situation, in any case, their flexibility is much lower than the flexibility a human employee can provide. Also, robots can orientate in structured situations, or this is at least for the moment, which means that when we have more unknown variables in a situation, then it becomes very difficult for a robot. Also, robots will and may be perceived as threat by human employees. We all remember. We have also read about the Buddhism movement from at the beginning of the 19th century, when workers in Britain were destroying machines because they were thinking that they were taking their jobs. Obviously, we can expect one such movement to arise if robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies become widely used. Now, what prior studies we have seen on the topic of robonomics? Well, we have opposing views of technological progress. The researchers' views range in two extremes. We have positive appraisal of liberating humans of manual labor and creating new business opportunities on one extreme. And on the other extreme, we have fear of pauperizing and making humans obsolete in a fully robotized society. Of course, we have 50 shades of gray in between. We have the optimists. These are the covers of only some of the books that that express the optimistic view of the machine age when we use robots, machines, automation technologies to produce goods and services instead of human labor. And more optimists, the future business surviving the machine age, all these share the same viewpoint that robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies, they are not taking the jobs of humans, but they are not replacing humans, but on the contrary, they are enhancing the human employees and they're increasing the productivity. Of course, we have the other extreme. We have the pessimists and authors who believe that artificial intelligence will receive satience and will reach satience, and it will be our final invention. That robots at one point will become so intelligent that they will perceive human beings as redundant species and will eliminate us. Of course, from an economic point of view, I could recommend these two books that also share a more pessimistic appraisal of the situation. Of course, we have another stream of the so-called transhumanists who think they can be considered as part of the optimists, but they are probably extreme optimists. They consider that at one point human beings and machines will merge and new type of species will appear. And they also say that this will happen by 2050. And I'm quite skeptical on these time frames. And of course, we have the disillusionment. We have other authors who say that transhumanism is intellectual nonsense, but other authors like Stephen Webb, by the way, I highly recommend his book, All the Wonder That Would Be. In this book, he makes an evaluation of all the technologies that were expected to appear and why these technologies are so difficult to develop and difficult to adopt, which is probably more important. Of course, in economics, there are different books that deal with the economic theory and how it will influence markets and the whole economic theory. We have books that deal with focus on different industries like cars, healthcare, journalism, financial markets, autonomous driving, and the political economy of robots, the books that deal with the power relationships within the society and how robots will change the power structure of society. Of course, robots are everywhere. It seems that society has an insatiable hunger for robots. And different conferences are organized, and books on basic income, one of the solutions of Robonomics, are published. And of course, on national security and warfare, but of course, the publications in this field are quite scarce. We can understand why. Even humanities deal with robots. And in these books, robots are discussed from anthropological perspective. This raised the question about robot ethics and whether robots can actually have rights and be recognized as beings, although not human beings, but robotic, mechanized beings, and how the use of robots will change the ethics of relationships within society. Of course, sex with robots. Unfortunately, no graphical pictures in these books. Even Dan Brown incorporated artificial intelligence as a character in his recent book. And if you have read it, you know the name of the character. So my statement is that Robonomics is inevitable. Last year, in October 2016, the National Science and Technology Council Committee on Technology and the Committee of Technology in the United States published two reports that were made available on the website of the President of the United States. They deal with that focus on how artificial intelligence will influence American economy and how the American economy should prepare for the widespread use of artificial intelligence. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development also published a report, several hundred pages, that deals with the next production revolution. All these reports, they state that companies, societies, governments should prepare for the massive introduction of robots and artificial intelligence in the next 10, 15 to 20 years. What are the principles of Robonomics? Most important, we have high level of automation. And this is the core of Robonomics. We have active use of a variety of single and multi-purpose industrial, service, and social robots. So robots will be ubiquitous. They'll be everywhere. However, I should mention, I should emphasize here something. We are not talking about robots that can fulfill various tasks. So that instead of, but robots that will implement only few tasks. So that instead of having one multifunctional robot that can perform various things at home, for example, to clean, to wash the dishes, to hang the laundry, to drive the car, etc. We shall have different simpler robots that will actually perform these things individually. And some of them will actually not resemble human beings. They will not have anthropomorphic features. Also, another principle is that all or most of the products are produced or provided by robots, artificial intelligence. We shall also have extremely high cost efficiency of production, economically efficient, on-demand, single few units production of some goods. Currently, 3D printing is considered as one of the technologies that would lead to this, but probably this technology would need to improve in the future. However, this high cost efficiency of production will lead to small and dispersed factories close to consumers. How would this happen? If we have, let's say that these simplified relationships, simplified charts that shows the relationship between the costs per unit and the number of units that are produced within a company. So this is the production capacity. The horizontal line, it shows the production capacity of a company. Let's say the number of units produced in a year, in a particular time unit. And on the vertical axis, we have the costs per unit. When we have high automation, then the curve that shows the relationship between the two variables will move from A to B. This would mean that the efficient production capacity will move from EPC1 to EPC2, which is a smaller production capacity, meaning that we should not need huge factories, but we could produce the same things, but with smaller factories. But when we have smaller factories, then this raises the question, where should these factories be located? And one of the solutions is that these factories, they will be located where the markets are, meaning that instead of having factories in developing economies and newly industrialized nations producing goods there and importing them in developed economies, probably we shall see the reverse movement of the factories going back to the developed economies and being located in large urban areas. We shall also have high level of standardization of services with algorithmization of service provision. This, however, raises the question, what happens with the human side of services? And probably one of the things that we will observe in the future will be the segmentation of companies, of service companies, into two big groups. One group that is that will be the group of high-tech companies, where you will have highly standardized services delivered by robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies. And we shall have another group of companies which we can call high-touch companies, which will focus more on the human side of the services. And instead of technology, they will use human employees to deliver the services. My personal suspicion is that the high-tech companies will charge lower prices than the high-touch companies, and probably customers will be more willing to pay for human services. Probably this in the future will be considered as a competitive advantage for some service companies. Also, labor and capital abundance are not competitive advantages in Robonomics, but knowledge and creativity. When we have huge economies of scale and low cost production of services and goods, then obviously labor and capital will not be considered as competitive advantage. Also, we shall have fewer but more knowledge intensive jobs. And finally, which will cause a lot of tension within the society, this will be the disconnection between employment and incomes. Currently, in every country in the world, we have at least 35–40% of people that receive money from employment. These are the people that are within employment age. But in the future, probably this share will decrease dramatically. What are the drivers of Robonomics? We can divide them into 4 different groups: macro-environmental, micro-environmental, corporate level, and psychological factors. First, the macro-environmental factors. These are the technology. Obviously, these are the advances of right technologies. What they make possible, what is possible to be automated, these technologies actually allow to be automated. Demography, we have aging populations in developed economies, which leads to disruptions in the labor market. And we see that every generation is smaller than the previous one, so that there will be huge demand for highly skilled labor. Probably at one point, companies will start thinking for substituting this labor for such technologies, so that they decrease their needs for labor. Politics, governmental control on populations will drive the adoption of some technologies. The legal framework, also anti-discrimination laws, labor laws, they make employment of, they make hiring human employees sometimes extremely difficult. Taxation, also taxation could make robots actually more favorable to be used by companies. Culture and society, also what are the attitudes, social attitudes towards such technologies, because these will influence the adoption rate within countries. Also, the microeconomic factors, these are the labor market, lack of sufficient and qualified human employees. This will be one of the major drivers which will push companies to automate some of the processes within their operations. The competitive pressure, if competitors use automation technologies, probably our company should think about using such technologies as well. And also customers, whether they accept to be served by robots or not. If they do not, and if they do not want, why should companies do? But we see that the new generations are more eager to use technology. They are tech savvy, so that this in the future they will probably adopt robots quite a lot. Also, on corporate level, we can think about economic efficiency. This will be one of the major drivers here. The look for cost efficiency, productivity, streamlining operations, all these will push companies to adopt automation technologies. And also, probably on psychological level, we can have some managers may just prefer to use robots and automation technologies instead of human employees, just because it's their preference. We should also consider this factor. And how will actually Robonomics come? What we have, of course, we will have step by step. Of course, we will not wake up in the morning and say, okay, now we live in a Robonomic society. No, it will develop gradually. It's already developing. We have adoption of automation technologies by individual companies in an industry. Then we have the spread of these technologies among other companies in the industry, then gradual spread of these technologies among industries and countries, and of course, spillover effects of automation technologies from developed countries to developing economies, in the form of substituting low-cost labor in developing countries for automated factories in developing economies and bots. These spillover effects, they are inevitable. For example, if we take one company we can take as an example a company let's say an American company that has a call center in India. Now, if someone calls the American company, the call is diverted to the Indian office, for example, and then the employees there answer the call and serve the customer. However, with bots, with artificial intelligence, at one point it would be easier for the company to have such an office with much fewer employees in the States rather than in India, so that what we'll see is that the company an American company that adopted the technology is actually influencing the market in a different economy. What are the benefits of Robonomics? We can divide them into short-term and long-term on the basis of when we shall see these benefits come into existence. So first, we see for its short-term benefits, we can see decrease in costs and prices as a result of economic efficiency, and probably improved environmental sustainability of production because of decrease in waste. But probably the more important are the long-term benefits. We shall see improved quality of life in the long term due to different factors. First, people will be liberated of hard manual labor. Actually, we have seen this in the last 2 centuries with the use of machines. Because of the machines, the share of people who are involved in manual labor actually decreased. We shall also see drastic increase in leisure time, which creates the social space for time for creative and pleasure activities, also for tourism activities. Also, we shall have less or no work-related stress, improved health, increased life expectancy. Currently, globally, there are less than 500,000 people that are above the age of 100, but probably in the future, being above the age of 100 will not be something unheard of. Of course, Robonomics will lead to global government, global citizenship, because as we will see later, when we discuss the challenges, we shall see that it will be extremely difficult for individual countries, individual governments to cope with the challenges of Robonomics. Probably at one point, countries will need to grow into we will need to unite into something global. And of course, accelerated space exploration obviously at least for the next decades, active space exploration is feasible only by robots, regardless what Hollywood says. Of course, there are numerous challenges to robonomics. The first one, and this is the main problem that authors and recognize, and this is unemployment and relative overpopulation. Fewer human employees and lower salaries. Here you can see two recent studies, Friend, Osborne, and DeCanio, which actually focus on this one. The first one, it was extremely popularized in the last couple of years. The authors found that about 47% of all jobs in the United States are at risk of being substituted by artificial intelligence. And also, DeCanio showed that when we use robots with when we use robots instead of human labor, there would be a significant drop in wages. Obviously, this is an obvious conclusion. However, such results, they fuel the fear of automation. Of course, there are other challenges of robonomics. Psychological problems of people who find themselves with too much free time and nothing to do and no need to work. Sometimes I joke that free time is people's enemy number one, because when people have too much free time, they need to find different activities so that their brain has to be active. And now when people work, their mind is occupied with work besides other issues. But when people do not need to work, what will happen? Pleasurable activities? Yeah, fine, but we'll see later. Fear, social unrest, political instability. This can be expected. If we have historically unprecedented unemployment rate of reaching over 50, definitely we can expect political instability and the rise of far right or far left political movements. We have seen what happened during the Great Depression, when in Europe unemployment in some countries surpassed 20-25%. And we saw fascism, communism, and other ideologies that gained huge popularity because of economic instability. Also, we can observe migration. We're not talking about millions, but we're talking about tens of millions, if not more, if unemployment reaches historically unprecedented high levels of above 50%. And ultimately, this may lead to some wars. However, there are also long-term challenges. Possible functional illiteracy. Humans may forget how to do things once robots do them. For example, a century ago, nearly every man could ride a horse. But how many of us can now ride a horse? I cannot. Once robots start doing things we shall not, and when we do not need to do some things, we may forget how these things are done. Also, we may observe division of society between employed and unemployed, so that there might be other clashes in society, but also changes in social values. Is human life valuable? Do we need other people to satisfy our needs when we have robots? Especially if we have robots in the type of companion robots. Also, possible significant decrease in population in the long term when birth rates decrease. So these are actually quite significant challenges, And these challenges fuel the fear of different people about the fear from automation technologies. But what solutions can we have to the challenges of robonomics? The prior literature has elaborated on some solutions on technological employment, and these include like different instruments like mandating employment, so that companies, for example, use a certain number of employees, or government job creation. This means that the government hires people so that they do not stay unemployed. Work sharing would mean that instead of having one employee working 8 hours a day, to have 2 employees working 4 hours a day. Or employment impact statements. For example, if a company wants to change technology or make some reorganizations, it needs to prepare employment impact statement to show what will be the influence of this technology on employment. You may use tax policies, for example, financial incentives for job creation. Of course, all these solutions, they assume that given the right stimuli, the economy will create enough jobs to keep full employment. However, these solutions, they may work on the road to robonomics, but in order to mitigate the impacts of technological employment, but not during robonomics, when society reaches full robotization of economy and people do not need to work. So that these may be considered as some temporary solutions. So what solutions can we have to the challenges of robonomics? First, and probably one of the easiest, is constant and fluid, free, lifelong education. This means that instead of going to the university for a bachelor degree, for master, probably some people for a PhD, people will need to be related to the university, to be connected with the university for a long time. Probably at one point we may see the disappearance of classic degrees, like classic educational levels of bachelor, master, and PhD, because in a automated economy, these will lose their value. Probably at one point we will see micro degrees, something like short 1 to 3 months courses, which help the employees improve specific skills until they need to go to the next level few years later. Sorry. Also, we may society would need entertainment, would need tourism and leisure activities, would need volunteering. This is because people will have a lot of free time. And when people have a lot of free time, sometimes revolutions happen. And if societies want to avoid social revolutions and violent revolutions, they will need people's minds busy. So entertainment, tourism and leisure, volunteering, they may help to focus people's energy in some directions. Also, robot-based taxation, universal basic income, birth control, birthright patents, and redefinition of human rights. These are some more radical proposals, and I shall briefly explain them. First, about universal basic income. The sense of universal basic income is that that every person in the country receives certain amount of money without the need to work, no questions asked. For example, let's say every citizen of Bulgaria to receive 500 euros every month, just because the person is a citizen of the country. So when people receive such universal income, this universal income serves as a social safety net, so that in a robotized society and robotized economy, when there are very, very few jobs, people would need some income, and this is proposed as one of the solutions. It's also easier to administer because currently there are tens and hundreds of different social payments in a country, and all of them require a lot of money and a lot of bureaucracy to administer. But universal basic income, when everyone receives the same amount of money, regardless whether the person is employed or not, actually would will be actually quite easy to administer. Oh, but there are many disadvantages. Also, for example, it will require a lot of resources to finance, which in the absence of or limited proceeds of income taxes may be difficult to finance. Also, it may suppress many people's stimulus to work and improve their skills, thus making them permanently unemployable. So if people know that if some people know that they receive certain income every month, regardless whether they work or not, they may say, okay, I will not search for work. I know that I will receive certain amount of money, and I will not enroll in any free course in a university to improve my skills. But this means that they will become in time permanently unemployable. And also we may see migration and subsequent social tension if such income is introduced in one or few countries only without strict migration control. My personal viewpoint is that if universal basic income is introduced, it should not be done by one country, but it should be done either by a block of countries like let's say the European Union or NAFTA, or it should be introduced even more radically on a global scale. This will raise the question who will administer it, and one of the solutions is a global government, which I mentioned as one of the outcomes of Robonomics. And of course, some people, including Bill Gates, propose that robots should be taxed, so that if a company uses a robot, then it should pay taxes just as employees are taxed for their incomes. However, for robot taxes, I see one major problem. They need tax authorities. They will need very precise definition what is considered a robot and what not. And definitely, robot-producing companies, they will be able to make so small changes so that the new versions, they will probably be not called robots, so that they will not fall into the legal and tax definition of a robot, and companies will not pay. So we shall see a mouse and cat game between tax authorities and the robot manufacturers. And I personally do not believe that robot taxes are feasible. And of course, there are some more radical solutions, and I can illustrate it with another cover of Dan Brown's books. Redefinition of human rights. The French Revolution gave us the Declaration of Human Rights, and the end of the Second World War and the creation of the United Nations organization gave us the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Human rights are actually subject to negotiation within a society. They are not something that is written in stone and stays in time forever. And it is specific for a particular period of human development. So some politicians in the future, when they face the challenges of robonomics, they might say that, okay, let's then redefine the human rights. And they may say that people have three basic rights: biological, political, and economic. And in each of them, they can either have it or not have the right. The biological right, this is the right to reproduce, whether to have children or not. The political right, whether to vote or not to vote. And the economic right, whether to have basic income or not. We may say that these are extreme definitions, but actually this is not the case. If we look at history, in most European countries, women received the right to vote between the two world wars. And in Switzerland, women were allowed to vote only as late as 1971. The right to reproduce, we've seen many countries that adopted strict reproduction rules. And the one-child policy in China is a good example. But here we're talking a more extreme version, whether the person should be able to reproduce or not. So if we can look at these three rights, each of them has two options: to have or not to have the right. We can have a matrix of 8 possible situations. So the first situation is when everyone is allowed to have children, is allowed to vote, and is allowed to receive basic income. So what we can see is that in such a situation, the country will go into default, because we shall have an increasing number of people that would need to receive basic income, and people might vote for politicians that promise that this will continue in indefinite future. So at the end, we may observe default of the country. If we see these situations alone, we can the final outcome will be either a default of the country, or mass poverty, or a demographic crisis. If we play with these situations, we can see that only a combination between options 2 and 7 actually provides a stable solution. People self-select whether they want the cozy life without work, but subject to sterilization, and without the right to vote, or they will not receive any guaranteed income, but will have the right to vote and reproduce. Of course, these are extreme. This is the redefinition of human rights is an extreme solution, and definitely it will not be adopted in the next decades. This will be a political suicide for the politician or the political party that proposes this, so that we can sleep well. And finally, we should never forget that we should face reality. Although comforting-wise, there is always a bigger audience for comforting-wise rather than unpleasant truths. Finally, as a summary, the robots have arrived and they are here to stay. Prepare. Some references and further reading. And thank you for the attention. I'm ready to answer your questions. Questions? Let's see. Thank you. Also, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. And if you have any questions, I'm available. You're asking on Facebook too. I'm not on Facebook at the moment. So let me just see. I will just stop sharing the screen. I will go on Facebook. So I see one question here. What is my opinion on the impact of robots in developing? I see one question here. I muted myself on Facebook because I can say that the impact of robots on developing countries will be absolutely the same as the impact on developed economies, and we shall have spillover effects, as I mentioned in the presentation, from developed to developing countries. When companies in developed economies introduce robots, artificial intelligence, and automation technologies, they will, in most cases, substitute employees from developing countries. Instead of outsourcing activities to companies in developing economies, they will use robots, automated factories, and chatbots in their country. Yeah, this was the question by Frida. Okay. Okay. Other questions? Okay. I see that there is a question from ANAHEI. Looking for. Do I think that robots will increase the gap between rich and poor? Definitely. Definitely, the gap between the rich and the poor will increase. However, the welfare of the poor will probably increase, so that the welfare of everyone will increase, but the richer will become even richer. I also thank you for this wonderful question. It's one of the main questions in political economy of robots, the gap between rich and poor, and how automation technologies are fueling it, or widening it. Okay. Other questions? Okay. If you don't have other questions, I would like to thank everyone for participating. You know my email, and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you.